He didn't look like he belonged there. His shoes were 2 years out of style, the laces frayed. His blazer didn't match his slacks. His tie was borrowed. You could tell by how loosely it sat around his collar, like it wasn't used to being worn. He walked into the boardroom holding a plain black notebook and a resume that had been printed at the public library. No cover letter, no portfolio, just confidence buried beneath quiet eyes. The other candidates looked up, barely registering him before going back to their phones, their whispered conversations, their polished handshakes. They had arrived in Ubers and Teslas. He had taken the train, 2 lines, 26 stops. But he didn't come to impress them. He came to be heard, even if no one realized it yet. The panel at the front of the room was made up of executives in smart casual, each seated behind glass bottles of water and thick stacks of applicant profiles. At the far end sat one man in silence, older, more still than the rest. A face some recognized from magazines and business journals, though few had ever seen him in person. Silas Vance, the billionaire who built one of the most powerful tech empires in the country. A man known for 2 things, his genius in systems logic and his obsession with finding brilliance where no one else thought to look. Noah sat quietly in the last open seat. No one offered a smile. No one asked his name. And when he finally opened his mouth, when the panel asked him about a basic systems algorithm and he began answering in a strange, roundabout way, one of the applicants stifled a laugh. "What is he even talking about?" someone whispered. But Silas didn't laugh. He leaned forward, because while everyone else heard hesitation, he heard something different. The structure, the patterns, the precision. It wasn't rambling. It was code, spoken. And when Noah finished, the billionaire stood up and clapped. Noah didn't grow up in the kind of place where internships like this were even imagined. His world was concrete and cracked sidewalks, a neighborhood stitched together by corner stores, noise, and moms who could stretch $30 into a week of dinners. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with his grandmother, a woman who read cookbooks like they were novels and called him her little professor, even when he was just quietly fixing the broken fan again. His school hadn't had a computer lab. The first time he touched a keyboard that wasn't from a busted-up library terminal was when he found an old laptop in a box someone left outside a thrift shop. It didn't power on, but the motherboard was intact. He fixed it with YouTube tutorials and patience that didn't belong to a 15-year-old. By 16, he was building scripts. By 17, systems. By 18, code that could weave around firewalls and dance between datasets like a language all its own. But no degrees, no mentorship, just notebooks full of patterns, hand-drawn logic trees, and questions no one else had asked him yet. Until this one. The internship posting had been short, almost suspiciously so. A vague invite from Vance Technologies, with a cryptic line at the bottom that caught his eye. Sometimes, the loudest voices say the least. Show us something that speaks without shouting. He didn't send a traditional application. He embedded an encrypted logic pattern in the metadata of his submission file. A riddle, almost. He assumed no one would notice, but someone did. 2 weeks later, a message arrived. You've been selected for a final round interview, in person. No prep required. Just bring yourself. And now, here he was, in the boardroom on the 38th floor, surrounded by glass, chrome, and confidence that wore Rolexes. The other candidates all looked like they'd stepped off the page of a business school brochure. Clean lines, Ivy League laughs, resumes full of programs Noah had never even heard of. He sat at the far end. No water, no leather folio, just his notebook and his silence. One by one, they were called to the front to give a short talk. 2 minutes to answer a scenario-based question. When it was Noah's turn, he stood slowly, walked up without notes. The prompt was simple. How would you approach solving a system-wide data breach without sacrificing speed or user integrity? He looked at them, at the executives who had already written him off, at the billionaire whose expression hadn't changed once since he entered. He took a breath and began. He didn't speak like the others. No buzzwords, no filler, no branded jargon. Instead, he started with something abstract, a metaphor about bridges that aren't built to collapse, but still need to know how to fall safely. The panel looked confused. A few shifted in their seats, but Silas Vance tilted his head. Noah continued, folding logic into story. The numbers were buried in phrases. A recursive function was hidden in a sentence about circles and mirrors. A fail-safe routine nested inside a metaphor about echoes. No one else understood, but Silas did. He didn't just hear words. He heard structure. He heard code. Noah's voice never rose. He didn't gesture or pace. He stood still, eyes steady, and spoke in what seemed like riddles, metaphors wrapped in math, phrases that meant nothing to most of the room. One of the execs leaned over to whisper to another, loud enough that Noah could hear. Is he even answering the question? Another candidate let out a soft laugh. A couple others exchanged glances. Someone checked their watch. But at the far end of the table, Silas Vance had gone completely still. He leaned forward slightly, fingers pressed together under his chin. His eyes were focused, not on Noah's face, but on the pattern of his words, the rhythm, the hidden recursion, the subtle structure. Noah had stopped using traditional language after the second sentence. He was speaking in logic, in a private layered syntax, a plus B nested in metaphor, a conditional loop disguised as a choice, a checksum hidden inside the phrase, you don't seal every leak, you reroute pressure before the pipe bursts. It wasn't rambling. It was code, and Silas recognized every piece of it. He didn't wait for Noah to finish. He stood, walked slowly to the whiteboard at the side of the room, picked up a marker. What's the line you just said about echoes and signal loss? He asked, voice calm, but cutting through the silence. Noah blinked. I said, echoes aren't always mistakes. Sometimes they're messages you haven't learned how to catch yet. Silas turned to the board, wrote down the sentence. Then, underneath it, he mapped its structure, revealing a recursive search algorithm embedded in the rhythm of the words. The room watched as the code bloomed across the board, logic wrapped in poetry. Mouths opened, eyes widened. The same exec who doubted Noah moments ago now leaned forward in disbelief. Silas turned back to Noah. Did you build the recursive architecture from scratch? Noah nodded. I used a mirror tree compression method. It fits inside natural language patterns, easier to hide, harder to teach. Silas blinked once, then smiled. Who taught you? Noah looked down at his notebook, then back up. No one. And in that moment, the room changed. Not because Noah had explained himself, but because he didn't have to anymore. Silas Vance, billionaire, builder of systems, and man who rarely smiled, put the cap on the marker, turned to the boardroom, and started clapping. Once, twice, then slowly a full applause, controlled, deliberate, not for show, not for drama, but for recognition. We don't need to hear from anyone else, he said. Interview's over. Noah stood there, stunned, still silent. The other candidates? Forgotten. The room didn't belong to them anymore. The boardroom emptied slowly, like a stage after a curtain call. The other candidates gathered their things in silence. No one dared to say it out loud, but it was clear. The interview had ended the moment Noah stopped sounding like them, and Silas realized that was the point. A few of them nodded to Noah on the way out. One offered a stiff, awkward, "Good luck." He didn't respond, not out of arrogance, but because he was still processing what had just happened. When the room finally cleared, Silas approached him directly. "You hit it, on purpose." It wasn't a question. Noah gave a small shrug. "No one ever listens when I explain it the regular way." Silas nodded slowly, as if hearing his own story in someone else's mouth. They listen now. Then he handed Noah a card. One side, matte black. The other, a handwritten access code. No name, no title. "Come Monday. 9th floor. Ask for me. You're not an intern." That Monday, Noah stepped into a part of the building most employees didn't even know existed. No signs, no HR orientation, just a fingerprint scanner and a plain metal door. Inside, a room full of screens, coffee-stained whiteboards, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire skyline. This wasn't an internship program. This was the Foundry, Silas Vance's private research lab, the place where theories became products, and products became the future. Noah didn't walk in like he owned the place. He walked in like someone who was finally allowed to put down his armor. There were no lanyards, no long bios, just work, just code, just possibility, and he belonged there. Within 6 months, he'd led a team that rebuilt one of Vance Tech's outdated AI models from the inside out. His recursive language parser became the foundation for a new predictive system used by global data centers. People began to ask, where did this guy come from? What school did he go to? How did we miss him? But by the time they asked, it didn't matter, because Noah wasn't waiting to be discovered anymore. He was building. Years passed. Noah never chased the spotlight. He didn't post milestones, didn't give interviews, didn't build a brand around his origin story. He let the work speak, and the work was loud. The recursive logic system he designed reshaped how global companies processed language. He'd quietly co-authored frameworks adopted by financial institutions, security firms, even medical AI. But Noah never forgot where he came from. He remembered the boardroom. He remembered the smirks, the confusion, the laughter, and the one person who listened. So he built something for the kids who spoke like he once did. It wasn't flashy. It didn't come with billboards or influencer campaigns. It was a classroom in a converted warehouse, tucked between a barber shop and an old pharmacy. Inside, 10 laptops, 1 whiteboard, a small fridge stocked with juice boxes and late-night sandwiches, a place where young minds could come in, no resumes, no transcripts, and just start building. The sign out front was a plain black panel with 4 small words printed in silver. Speak however you think. It was called The Loop, and within its walls, brilliance didn't need to explain itself. It just had to be heard. One evening, Noah sat at the back of the classroom, watching a 13-year-old kid named Ellis try to explain a new compression method he had come up with. The kid stumbled over his words, half-whispered, eyes glued to the floor. Noah didn't interrupt. He didn't correct him. He let him finish. Then he leaned forward and said quietly, "That's a looped hash, nested in a sentence structure. You buried a whole function inside a metaphor. Ellis blinked. I did? Noah smiled. Yeah, and it's brilliant. Let's write it down. Outside, the city moved like it always had. Fast, loud, indifferent. But inside that room, a door had opened. The same kind of door Noah had walked through all those years ago. And this time, he was the one holding it open. Somewhere, in another boardroom, another young candidate stumbles over an answer. He doesn't speak like the others. His logic is strange. His words bend sideways. Someone laughs under their breath. But at the far end of the table, a woman in a tailored suit leans forward. She's reading his words like a pattern. And then she smiles, because she's heard this kind of brilliance before. Genius doesn't always speak in full sentences. Sometimes it speaks in loops, echoes, fragments, and code. And when the right person is listening, asterisk, asterisk, they don't interrupt it. They rise for it. And they clap dot asterisk, asterisk.